Looking at everybody logging on to Zoom tonight, one by one, as you came into view, even though we are completely on Zoom once again, I couldn't help but smile. Mostly because you are you, and I love every one of you. And I love that you are still here for yourselves and for each other. I know it's not where we hope to be tonight, but regardless of the challenges and the distractions all around us, we are here. Good job, everyone. It's so hard to express what we've gone through in these months of pandemic, but a recent event halfway around the world gave me the exact word that I've been looking for. We have all had a case of the Twisties. I never heard of that word until last month's COVID-delayed Summer Olympics in Tokyo, when American gymnast Simone Biles, considered by many to be the greatest in history, suddenly withdrew from the competition after a major scare during practice. She was having trouble practicing on the uneven bars, and then she tried to rehearse her floor routine and found herself literally in uncharted territory as she attempted her tumbling. That's when the wires just snapped, she said later. Things were not connecting, and I don't know what went wrong. What went wrong, apparently, was that Biles had developed a case of what they call the Twisties. The Twisties, it's a sudden lack of awareness of where she was in midair. Now, Biles is renowned for adding all kinds of twists and contortions into her flips and somersaults as she soars through the air, including a double twisting somersault dismount on the uneven bars that makes her look like she's weightless in slow motion. And then suddenly, she couldn't do it. My body and my mind weren't in sync, she said. That's what I couldn't wrap my head around. Well, I can't think of a better way to describe what we've all gone through in this past 18 months. Our bodies and our minds are out of sync with each other and with everything going on around us. Our sense of powerlessness is overwhelming us as everyday tasks that were once routine become obstacle courses that constantly change or like a maze with no beginning and no end. Remember in the Harry Potter movies, how the stairwells at Hogwarts kept shifting and taking the students to anywhere or to nowhere? Yeah, like that. We started out with so much energy in the spring of 2020, presuming a brief shutdown that surely would end by late summer. And then we fell into languishing, as the current vernacular calls it, when we realized we were in for the long haul. The ups and downs have only accelerated these past few months. Vaccinations became widely available, but then half the adult population rejected them. People desperate to get out of town flocked to vacation spots on the shore or in the mountains or in parks, but then they were exposed to the Delta variant that attacks even those who have gotten their shots. School systems planned all summer for full openings. But then in late July, kids started getting really sick, and schools are now full of COVID, even in our area. Heated rhetoric and disinformation can continue to cause emotional stress. Back in May of this year, columnist Kathleen Parker wrote about how wonderful it was to attend the Carolina Cup steeplechase horse races down in her hometown, our adopted second hometown of Camden, South Carolina. The sight of so many smiles and cheeks and noses and chins was both jarring and joyous, she wrote. I joked to my husband that I didn't recognize people without their masks. 2 months later, at the end of July, Parker wrote of the brewing civil war between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. She even compared it to the worst sectarian violence of the Iraq War, when neighborhoods and families were torn apart by their differing responses to the US-led invasion of their country. Of course, we have a case of the Twisties. How could we possibly avoid it? But you know what? Somehow we are negotiating most of this surprisingly well. For the imperfect, stiff-necked humans that we are, somehow we are maintaining our bearings. It's not easy. It's not always pretty. But I think each of us is doing pretty well in the worst circumstances most of us have ever experienced. I think our pandemic-induced case of the Twisties has made us each feel more vulnerable, though. And even with a kind of sort of, we hope, end in sight, we still can't gauge where we are. We just still seem to be floating in midair. One reason I think is that whatever normal looks like at the end of this is not going to be the normal we left 18 months ago. There have been tectonic shifts in education, employment, and housing. We may be facing new choices about where we live, how we work, what we can expect from our kids, and what we can give them. We're seeing huge gaps in job availability, childcare accessibility, and housing costs. And we've seen tens of thousands lost to drug addiction. Among those of us gathered tonight to welcome our new year, some have lost jobs. Others have suffered terrifying illness. A number of us have lost a loved one this past year, year and a half, and we've not been able to mourn them as we would want. All of this will pose challenges to us that will seem insurmountable, but somehow we will get our sense of air awareness back again. Today is Rosh Hashanah, the day we celebrate as the birthday of the world. Yeah, it comes around every year on the first day of the month of Tishri, but the cycle of the year is not a perfect circle. It does not come back to that same space where we left it last year. It's more like a spiral, I think, like a slinky toy that coils back near where it came from, but farther ahead every time. Even if we wanted to go back to where we were a year ago or 2 years ago, we just couldn't. We have to move forward whether we like it or not. We have to grapple with change and new challenges and doors that open in front of us while doors close behind us tightly. That old reality no longer exists. Today is Rosh Hashanah, also the day we fear is the day of judgment, when according to our tradition, the good we have done in our lives is weighed against the not so good. Our prayers will tell us that life and death hang in the balance. Our Torah readings will teach us that we can choose life, physical life, spiritual life, emotional life, not by being perfect, but just by being human, not by trying to emulate someone else, but by being the best of ourselves. The famed Hasidic master Rabbi Zusha, an old story tells us, was laying on his deathbed surrounded by his disciples. He was crying and no one could comfort him. One student asked his teacher, "Why do you cry? You were almost as wise as Moses and as kind as Abraham." Rabbi Zusha answered, "But when I pass from this world and appear before the heavenly tribunal, they won't ask me, 'Zusha, why weren't you as wise as Moses or as kind as Abraham?' They will ask me, 'Zusha, why weren't you more like Zusha?' And then what will I say?" And then what will I say? That's the question that each of us asks ourselves tonight. In one sense, these days of awe do pose this tremendous challenge to each of us. But in some ways, I think that these days and this coming of the new year are designed to remind us that we should also cut ourselves some slack. That even or especially on this day of judgment, God expects each of us to strive not for perfection, but to be the best me that we can be. That is what will bring us a sense of satisfaction, a sense of relief, and most of all, a sense of joy. Joy at just being us. Joy at just being human. And that's what I thought about when I saw that photo of Simone Biles, right after she finished her balance beam routine, the one and only event she competed in at the very end of the Olympics gymnastics competition. It wasn't her best performance of all time. It wasn't her most difficult. She had to take out those twisting moves on the dismount that had made her famous and substitute one that was just as hard by the rest of the world's standards. She did it. She did it well enough to earn a bronze medal. And she, Simone Biles, the perfectionist, the greatest of all time, was really good with that. She wasn't judging herself against anyone else's standards. I was, she said, just going out there and doing this for me. And that photo, her hand over her heart, a lightness in her step, a smile on her face, a real smile, not the forced smile that all gymnasts flash right before they start a routine, but a genuine glow from inside of her, happy at rediscovering, maybe for the first time in a long time, what it is that made her fall in love with gymnastics in the first place, what made her feel grounded in a whole world suffering from the twisties. Today is Rosh Hashanah, the birthday of the world and the day of judgment, a day of reflection and of celebration, a day when we take stock of the past and move into the future. As we celebrate our world, we also celebrate ourselves. All through the 6 days of creation, God took stock. Vayar Elohim ki tov, and God saw that it was good. It was only after the 6th day, the day that humans were created, that God saw, and hine tov me'od, behold, it was very good. The world is better. The world is much better because we are in it. As the gates of prayer and forgiveness open wide to us on these days of awe, the choice each of us faces now is simply how to make our very presence something full of purpose and full of joy. Tonight, you all got a very good start. Good job, everyone. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Be this God's will and our mission here on earth, as we say together, Amen.